Welcome to the Monsters Among Us podcast. This is Season 2, Episode 12, The Valentich Disappearance. So, October 1978. Over the Bass Strait, pretty cold waters there, between mainland Australia and Tasmania, a young pilot, Frederick Valentich, just vanishes. And, well, for anyone interested in the unexplained, this case, it sort of ticks all the boxes, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's become, a real staple.
Yeah.
You've got the pilot reporting something incredibly strange.
Ah.
You've got these weird sounds over the radio just before everything cuts out. And then nothing. The plane's gone, no wreckage, no trace. It's deeply unsettling.
Right. It really feeds into that whole what really happened out there kind of speculation. We're talking about a guy on a routine flight, more or less.
Well, a training flight.
A training flight, right.
Yeah.
And it just goes completely off the rails into something else.
Exactly. And what makes it so compelling, especially, for our audience, is that firsthand account, his own words, his growing panic almost, leading up to that final, pretty definitive statement he makes.
It's not an aircraft. We'll definitely get to that. But first, maybe a bit about Valentich himself. He was young, right?
Yeah, only 20. And his flying experience was relatively limited, about 150 hours.
Okay.
He had a Class 4 instrument rating. That let him fly at night, but, and this is important, only in VMC, visual meteorological conditions. Basically, good weather where you can see.
So not flying blind in clouds or anything?
Shouldn't have been, no. He had actually tried for the Royal Australian Air Force, the RAAF, twice, but didn't get in. Educational requirements, apparently.
Ah, okay. And he was studying to be a commercial pilot?
He was, but he'd been having some trouble. Failed a few licensing exams recently before the disappearance. And there were, a couple of incidents in his record.
Oh, like what?
Things like straying into controlled airspace once. Another time, apparently deliberately flying into clouds. So maybe a bit of a pattern of, let's say, pushing boundaries.
Interesting. Adds another layer. And then there's this whole UFO angle before the flight even happened.
Right. That's a really significant part of the story. His father mentioned Frederick was a, quote, ardent believer in UFOs, even worried about being attacked by one.
Wow. Okay.
And maybe even more pointedly, his girlfriend, Rhonda Rushton, said that just 6 days before he vanished, he talked to her about UFOs.
And specifically raised the possibility of, being taken by one.
Okay, that's pretty specific.
Yeah.
And it definitely colors how you might interpret what happened next.
It could, yes. It provides a potential framework for how he might have interpreted, unusual stimuli that night.
And the flight plan itself was a bit fuzzy.
It was, yeah. He told air traffic control he was flying to King Island to pick up friends.
Okay. Standard enough.
But he apparently told others he was going to get crayfish. Turns out neither story seemed to be true. The friends weren't expecting him. The crayfish story didn't check out.
Huh. Why the discrepancy?
Good question. And he also didn't notify King Island Airport he intended to land, which is, standard procedure. You're supposed to do that. So it just feels a bit off from the start. Like maybe the official reason wasn't the real reason.
It certainly raises questions. Was he being evasive? Was there another purpose for the flight he didn't want on record? It adds that sense that maybe this wasn't just a simple trip.
Okay, let's get to the transmissions, because that's the real core of this mystery, isn't it?
Absolutely. The spine chiller, as you called it. It starts around 7:06 p.m. He radios Melbourne Air Traffic Control, says there's an unidentified aircraft following him. He's at 4,500 feet.
And Melbourne checks their radar?
They do. And they tell him, nope, no known traffic near you at that altitude.
Okay, so immediately there's a conflict. He sees something, they don't.
Exactly. Then he describes it. Says it's large, unknown, has 4 bright lights he thought maybe landing lights, and that it passed really close, maybe 1,000 feet above him, moving fast.
1,000 feet. That's close.
Very close. Then he says it's approaching him from the east. And he uses this word. He says it seems to be toying with him.
Toying. That's an odd word choice for an aircraft encounter.
It is. It suggests deliberate, almost playful or menacing maneuvers, not just, flying past.
Then the description gets even stranger.
It does. He says it's orbiting above him now.
Yeah.
And he describes the object itself, says, has a shiny metallic surface and a green light.
The green light, that detail comes up again later, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. There were other reports of a strange green light in the sky around that time. We can circle back to that.
Okay. And then things get worse for him.
Right around then, he reports engine trouble. Rough idling, potential problems.
Which could be unrelated, I guess. Stress, maybe. Or maybe not.
Or maybe not, because right after mentioning the engine, he delivers that absolutely crucial line.
Go on.
He says quite clearly, It is not an aircraft.
Chilling, just point blank, not an aircraft.
Definitively. And almost immediately after that, the transmission is interrupted.
By what?
By this noise, described later as metallic scraping sounds. Really harsh, grating noises over the open mic.
Metallic scraping.
And then silence. Complete loss of contact. Never heard from again.
Wow, okay. That sequence, the description, the not an aircraft line, the sounds, the nothing. That's powerful.
It really is. It paints this picture of a sudden, very strange, possibly violent end to the communication and, well, to everything.
No, you mentioned radar earlier. ATC couldn't see the other object. What about Valentich's plane? Was he on radar during this encounter?
And here's another really puzzling piece. According to the official reports, his Cessna 182 was not plotted on radar at any time after he reported seeing this object near Cape Otway.
Wait, so his own plane wasn't showing up where he said he was having this encounter?
Apparently not during that specific time frame of the interaction. This throws another major question mark into the mix. Was he actually where he thought he was? Or is there another explanation for the lack of radar contact?
That complicates things massively, because if he's not on radar there, then, well, what does that mean for his report?
Exactly. Did something interfere with radar? Was he mistaken about his location? Or, as some suggest, did the phenomenon itself have properties that somehow masked or affected radar detection in the area? It's a key point that fuels a lot of the stranger theories.
Okay, so he vanishes from the radio. What happens next? The search, presumably.
Oh yeah, a massive search and rescue operation kicked off almost immediately, sea and air. They had ships out there, a big RAAF Orion surveillance plane, plus 8 civilian aircraft.
Covering a big area.
Huge. Over 1,000 square miles of the Bass Strait. They searched intensively for 4 straight days.
And found.
Absolutely nothing. Not a scrap of wreckage, no oil slick, no emergency beacon signal, nothing. It was as if the plane and Valentich had just been plucked out of the sky.
That's unusual, right? Even in crashes over water, usually something turns up.
Highly unusual, especially given the scale of the search effort in the immediate aftermath. Debris fields, oil slicks, they're common. The complete lack of any physical evidence at the time is one of the most baffling aspects.
So what did the official investigation conclude? With no wreckage, no pilot.
The Australian Department of Transport investigation, well, they couldn't determine the cause. They basically had to declare it presumed fatal.
Understandable, but unsatisfying.
Very. There was, of course, speculation within official channels. Maybe he became disoriented. Flying over water at night, the black hole effect, it can happen.
Right, losing sense of up and down.
Exactly. Maybe he saw his own lights reflected off the water, or lights from a distant island or boat, and misinterpreted them as another craft. There was even a theory floated that he might have somehow gotten inverted, flying upside down without realizing it, and the lights he saw were actually on the ground or sea.
Flying upside down, is that plausible without noticing?
It's theoretically possible in certain disorientation scenarios, especially for a pilot with his level of experience at night over featureless water, but it struggles to account for the specifics.
Yeah, like the toying, the orbiting, the green light, the metallic sounds. Those don't really fit with just being disoriented, do they?
Not easily, no. Those details, especially his increasingly agitated tone and that final declaration, these suggest he was reacting to something external and genuinely perplexing, at least in his perception.
Okay, but then something did eventually turn up, years later.
Yes, 5 years after the disappearance. A piece of wreckage washed ashore on Flinders Island, which is quite a ways east of the Bass Strait search area.
What was it?
It was identified as an engine cowl flap from a Cessna 182. And crucially, the serial numbers on the part narrowed it down to a specific manufacturing block that included Valentich's aircraft.
So, potentially a piece of his plane.
Potentially, yes. The Bureau of Air Safety Investigation looked into it, considering ocean currents and drift patterns, trying to see if it was plausible for it to have traveled from the disappearance area to Flinders Island over 5 years.
Was it plausible?
It was considered plausible, yes. But it's still just one small piece, found years later, far away. It confirms his plane broke up at some point, but it tells us almost nothing about the how or the why of the disappearance itself. A tangible clue, but ultimately inconclusive.
Right. So, for the ufologists, the paranormal investigators, this case must seem like a prime example.
Oh, absolutely. For many in that field, it's Exhibit A for potential alien abduction or perhaps destruction of an aircraft by a UFO.
Because of the descriptions, the green light especially.
Yes, the description of the object, its maneuvers, the green light, which, as I mentioned, ties into other reports. There were accounts from people on the ground that night reporting seeing an erratically moving green light in the sky around the same time in general area.
Corroboration of a sort.
Of a sort, yes.
Yeah.
Anecdotal, but it aligns. And those metallic scraping sounds, some interpret that as potentially the sound of the UFO interacting physically with his aircraft, maybe grabbing it, maybe causing structural failure.
It's a terrifying thought.
It is. It's also worth noting, on the more skeptical side of light phenomena, that Mount Stromlo Observatory confirmed there was a meteorite stream active that night. They estimated maybe 10-15 sightings per hour.
So, could the green light reports have been meteors?
It's possible some sightings were, yes. It adds another layer of ambiguity to the green light evidence. Did people see meteors, or did they see what Valentich saw? Or both?
And then there were photos. Something about photos.
Right. The Ground Saucer Watch, GSW Group, circulated a claim about photos taken, supposedly, by a plumber named Roy Manifold, who was apparently taking pictures of the sunset near Cape Otway Lighthouse around the time Valentich disappeared. The photos, developed later, allegedly showed a fast-moving object sort of exiting the water nearby.
Exiting the water, like a USO unidentified submerged object.
That was the implication GSW leaned towards. They described the object in the photos as having moderate dimensions, maybe surrounded by a cloud-like vapor or exhaust residue.
But were the photos clear?
No, apparently very unclear, which of course leads to the counter-argument.
Let me guess. It was a bird. A bug close to the lens.
Exactly. Skeptics suggested it was much more likely something mundane, an out-of-focus insect, a bird, a lens flare, anything but an object emerging from the ocean. The ambiguity makes the photos interesting, but hardly conclusive proof of anything extraordinary.
So when you boil it all down, we're left with these really persistent mysteries.
Absolutely. You've got the pilot's own report of something that wasn't an aircraft. You have those deeply unsettling metallic sounds right before contact is lost.
The detail of the green light echoed by some ground sightings.
The really confusing lack of radar confirmation, both for his plane during the encounter and for this supposed other object.
And just the complete vanishing act. No debris, no explanation that really satisfies all the reported details.
Precisely. The official investigation couldn't find a cause. Skeptical explanations like disorientation struggle to fit all the pieces, particularly the audio evidence.
So, the true fate of Frederick Valentich, it really does remain unknown.
Completely unknown. And that void, that lack of a definitive answer, is where the speculation thrives. It leaves the door wide open, doesn't it, for considering possibilities that go way beyond the ordinary.
It certainly does. A truly enduring mystery. That's the end of the episode. Until next time, keep to the shadows. Some legends are best left undiscovered.